Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the NBA Front Office Show. Trades. The trade market is starting to heat up a little bit. We're hearing some rumblings. Obviously, we're still a little ways away from the trade deadline, but we got a little juicy tidbit about an individual named Kyrie Irving that we need to break down. Keith Smith joining me. Find him at Keith Smith NBA over on Twitter. Keith, how are you doing? And could Kyrie Irving actually be leaving the Nets?
Yeah, I mean, we're going to get into it. It's interesting the way the report came out. Ian Begley, who works for SNY, I believe that's Sportsnet New York, he is reporting. Ian has been covering the New York teams for years, and is really pretty close to them. His reporting is that the Nets are not making calls on trading Kyrie Irving, but they are taking calls on trading Kyrie Irving. So that is a little different, right? But it's also very different from just saying where they're shutting it down, they're not even interested, and all those questions. There's another piece of news within that same article that we'll talk about in a little bit. But the Kyrie Irving portion is interesting. One of the thoughts is it's still an open-ended question whether or not he'll play or not. I'm under a puppy attack here, just off camera. There is an open-ended question whether or not he'll play this season because he, as we know, is still unvaccinated. Unvaccinated players can't play in New York. That doesn't seem to be changing anytime soon. And the Nets will not let him be a part-time player. So here we are. Could a team trade for Kyrie Irving? Yeah, maybe. There's other complicating factors is he's got a player option for next year that's likely to be declined and become a free agent. And what does that look like with that? What does it look like matching salary and those kind of things? But yeah, it's definitely an interesting situation to monitor.
So let's talk about that. The Nets are taking calls on Kyrie Irving. They're willing to listen in terms of moving him. But there's a lot of factors here in order to get a deal done. So, Keith, you and I talked about each of us coming up with a potential trade for Kyrie Irving, and you instantly run into a number of factors that make a Kyrie Irving trade extremely difficult. I mean, first and foremost, just the logistics, getting there in terms of salary, that's not easy. Then you've got to talk about, okay, which teams actually need what Kyrie Irving brings? What teams need a point guard? So that's going to eliminate some teams. So you eliminate some possibilities just because of the logistics of executing a trade. You eliminate some more teams in terms of what do they actually need on the basketball court? Is this something that they want right now? You can eliminate some other teams where they either feel like they're already good enough to where they are a contender, or they know they're not trying to be a contender. Realistically, you're probably looking at teams that are more middle of the pack that are looking to make a jump up. So you eliminate some more possibilities there. And then finally, there's the reality, and it's hard to really know for sure how teams feel. There's going to be some teams who will just say no, period, because it's Kyrie. Like for example, I can't imagine.
Sorry,
hello.
My buddy here. My buddy Tatum, he wanted to say hello. He was very much trying to get up here into the frame. So
Of course,
here
his color is
Here's
green.
Tatum. Getting big.
Tatum.
Yes, his collar is green. He has a Celtics collar. All right, buddy, you gotta go.
Speaking of your Celtics, I would have to imagine they would be on the list of teams that would just be an absolute no in terms of Kyrie Irving, even if they had the need, even if they had the financial flexibility to do it, just based on personality and not wanting to go. Let's face it, there are some headaches that come with Kyrie Irving being on your team. There's some teams that will just say, we don't want to do that.
Correct.
So once you add in all those factors, you're not left with that many teams that could actually make a deal here.
No, absolutely. That's the challenge. You kind of hit on all of them. We've talked about this with the John Wall situation. It's not all that different, other than Kyrie has shown more recently that he's a far more productive player. Of course, we're not even going to try to pretend that he hasn't. The salary concerns are fairly similar. The finding a team that needs a point guard, fairly similar within that. And then, as you mentioned, the bigger, sorry, it's a circus here today at the Smith house. So we're got all sorts of nonsense happening. All right, they're clearing out. So, all right. So, as you said, it's putting all those things together makes it difficult. But we endeavored
Yes.
with our challenge to find a couple teams. So you want to go first, or do you want me to go
I'll
first?
go first because I'm sure your trade is probably better than mine. And I also had to factor in he's a he could be a free agent in a few months, right? So
Yes.
it's possible that he's just a rental here, right? Like
Yeah. How
that's
much are you willing to give up for a guy who could just bounce? Yep.
exactly. So here's where I'm at. And I don't know, based on what they just did last night, the Miami Heat, I don't know that they would do this. And the Cavs, that's the team I'm going with, may just say, we've done the Kyrie thing. We don't want to do the Kyrie thing again, right? But
Sure.
we're limited in terms of options of which teams would actually have incentive here to make a trade. We know they lost Colin Sexton, so there's some need there. The Cavs have been better than expected this season. They have not been good in a little while. Might they have a little bit of extra motivation to say, you know what, let's do something to kind of put us over the top here? And Kyrie being a pending free agent potentially could actually be a positive for them because they can talk themselves into, well, hey, if this works, great, we get in the playoffs and then we can go from there. And maybe Kyrie can be a big playoff performer for us. But if it doesn't, then we can rid ourselves of him shortly. So with that in mind, I wouldn't want to, if I'm the Cavs, I wouldn't want to give up any major long-term pieces. That means Darius Garland, you're not going anywhere. Evan Mobley, obviously not going anywhere. The pieces that I've added into this deal, Ricky Rubio, who I think has been great for them, but he's a big salary that you just probably have to put in if you're going to try to make a deal like this work. And let's get a little controversial here. Colin Sexton. Putting him in the trade, the incentive for the Nets being that now you're going to have the ability to re-sign him this offseason, knowing that he's somebody that you could keep around long term. Obviously, you're not going to see him this season, but if you're the Nets, you're not going to see Kyrie this season either. That's the way that you're approaching this. And if Kyrie is a flight risk, if you think he's going to bolt, you at least want the opportunity to hang on to a promising guard. And in this case, you'd be getting a good one in Colin Sexton, potentially, if everything goes okay with healing up. Now, Ricky Rubio, of course, is probably not enough help nor enough salary this season to really make the Nets go, okay, yeah, this is something we'll do. So, and this is where I might be going a bit too far, but I'm including Isaac Okoro into the
Oh,
into the deal as well. Exactly. And that's where I think it may fall apart. But like I said, this is a very difficult endeavor. That's a tough chip to part with, but I had to look at it from what would the Nets need in order to actually pull the trigger on something and finally decide, okay, that's it. We're done with Kyrie. And so that's what I'm putting in this trade. Again, it's pretty far-fetched, and that's why I said I think your deal is going to be more realistic than mine is. But this is not easy, finding a home for Kyrie Irving.
yeah. I think I would try to sell the Nets on Jetty Osman and
Yes,
then
that was my other
supplement with
option.
a pick. Maybe offer up maybe like something like a top 10 protected pick or something like that, just in case it all goes
Yeah,
poorly for the Cavs, just because that gives you a little bit of lineup balance too, because then you got to figure, can you play the three bigs, which in your scenario here you'd be retaining Allen, Mobley, and Markkinen,
hmm
and Kyrie and Garland. That that'd be kind of funny because that's like three 7-footers and two small
yeah,
guards
right.
together. But yeah, I mean, I like the idea. I looked at Cleveland for a while too, after posing this idea to you of, hey, let's each come up with a
hmm
trade, and I struggled a little bit in that one, just the history there too.
Yeah,
I'm not sure. So where I went a different place, but a similarly, well, a team that made the playoffs, but I think would love to make that next step and push forward. And I went with the Dallas Mavericks because what I was looking for in a Kyrie Irving trade was a team that could maybe keep him beyond this year. Um, a team that is not afraid to spend money
hmm
and not afraid to get expensive because he is going to opt out. I mean, and
yeah,
that's not a criticism at all. That's just a smart play on his part to maximize his earnings. So what I threw together was Tim Hardaway Jr.,
hmm
Maxi Kleba, and a first round pick going back to Brooklyn. Now, the pick would have to be a little bit further down the line because the Mavs have this obligation owed to the Knicks. But you can write that as in 2 years after that pick is conveyed, and get it out, a couple years
sure.
on that end there. Plus, if you're Brooklyn, you may not be upset about getting a pick further down the line because who knows what Dallas will look like
Mhm.
in a few years. And then heading back to Dallas, Kyrie Irving and Paul Millsap, just to kind of balance out rosters a little bit there. My thought process was Joe Harris is now down. If you're getting rid of Kyrie Irving, you're not going to have him. You're going to have James Harden on the ball all the time
Mhm.
anyway as your primary facilitator. So why not get another shooter out there in Hardaway? Kleba's a stretch big who gives them something different from all of their other bigs because he can step out and shoot. He's also a pretty good shot blocker, something they don't necessarily have right now. And then the pick is just kind of that in there to make up for the difference in talent. Millsap hasn't exactly worked out great, so you move on from him. And then Irving to Dallas. And I think if you're the Mavs, the idea of a Kyrie, Luka, Porzingis trio supplemented by, you know, serviceable bigs, Cauley Stein, Powell, Boban, Moses Brown, and then you've got enough shooting on the wing and
Mhm.
in Reggie Bullock. I think Kyrie's kind of the ideal guy because he's played for years alongside high usage players. So for with whether it be LeBron or Kevin Durant and now Kevin Durant and James Harden. So I think that he could thrive next to Luka playing that kind of role. So that was the one that kind of jumped out as me rather, just because I think then the Mavs are a team I could see maybe saying, let's do it. Let's kind of go all in and go. The one I really liked was Toronto,
Yes,
maybe
that was
trying to
another
take
one
a
I looked
shot
at.
on.
Something
The
with
challenge there
Siakam or
is
something like that.
yeah,
Yeah.
and that's where I was going with something built around Siakam. Your challenge, if you're the Raptors, though, is Canada has this vaccine mandate coming in the middle of January,
Yeah.
so that kind of ruins the whole thing
Right.
there. So try to stay clear of any of that kind of stuff. So, but I think the bigger point in all of this, and please let us know in the comments if what trade you like. We should have been clear with a disclaimer. We took Ben Simmons for
Oh
Kyrie as
yes.
basically a straight up swap off the table. Just it is too easy, right?
Yeah.
I think that's almost too easy and too quick to get to. So we took that off the table. But let us know your favorite Kyrie Irving trades. Let us know if you like either one we came up with. Let us know if you hate either one we came up with. But the real point of this was it's not easy. Like
Oh no.
this is hard to find a landing spot.
And Keith, and like if I had a vote, I would vote for your trade because I have the Mavs as making more sense as a landing spot. I wanted to try to do something with Cleveland, and frankly, when you're adding in like a Ricky Rubio, the Nets don't really need that. He just has to be in it for the salary purposes because you mentioned they've got Harden, they've got Patty Mills, Kevin Durant can handle the ball. So I do like what they're getting in the Mavs trade a bit better, but at the same time, if you look at either of these trades, if you were a Nets fan, would you be particularly excited
No.
about any of these pieces coming
Well,
in? I mean,
in general, no, because
right.
you're getting worse
But
players
but you're getting
than
something,
Kyrie.
whereas right
You're
now you
getting
have nothing.
something.
Yeah.
It's almost akin to the Simmons situation
Hmm.
where you're getting something that replaces literally the nothing you're
Yeah.
getting right now. So that has to become your thought process on this. Let's get into the other part of this story
Yes.
from Ian Begley. He put out there that James Harden, believed to be one of the 30 players on Philadelphia's magical list of guys they'll accept for Ben Simmons. All right, I think we all know that, right? They already tried to trade Simmons for him. But he also kind of led in a little bit that there's some nervousness in the Nets organization about retaining James Harden. He didn't go as far as saying they're going to trade him
Right.
to because they're that worried or anything, but just that he didn't sign the extension. Now that was never going to happen. Much like with Kyrie Irving is going to opt out, Harden's going to opt out this year and make more money plus lock in a longer deal. That was always going to be the way that was probably going to go. It just wasn't going to be a thing he was going to do extension wise, but but now what you do wonder is what if they don't win the championship? What if things don't go the way they're hoping? What if this Kyrie Irving thing falls apart? Is James Harden going to look at it and say, all right, this was cool, but do I want to be somewhere else? And that's where it gets kind of interesting there in that whole kind of thought process. And
Hmm.
why what Begley wrote about was Philly is expected to be a suitor for Harden. Of course, right? I think we all kind of know
No
that.
surprise there.
That's not unexpected at all there. So yeah, I just thought that was kind of interesting that was the like add in to this.
He also mentioned the number of minutes that Kevin Durant is playing. I believe he's
Yes.
seventh in the NBA in minutes per game
Yeah, it
right
was like
now.
seventh, eighth, ninth, something like
Yeah.
that. But it's a lot more than they want it to be.
Yeah. And so that's a factor here. And Steve Nash basically said, do you want to cut down Kevin Durant's minutes? Because that means we're going to lose more games. What do you
Yep.
want me to do? We're missing Kyrie. We're missing Joe Harris now. If I cut his minutes, then we lose. So, which, I mean, it was a little bit interesting because Nash didn't really pull any punches in terms of, well, we're, confident in the rest of our roster or anything like that. He pretty much just said Kevin Durant is amazing. And if I pull him off the floor, we're going to lose.
Yeah.
So,
Well, and to Kevin Durant's side of that too, this is the quote. I'll read it verbatim. I'm a basketball player. I
yeah.
enjoy to play. I want to play for 48 minutes. That's just what it is. I like to play. If I can convince coach to play me the whole second half sometimes and put me in earlier in quarters, I'm going to do it. It don't matter. My basketball life is not that long, so I'm going to get the most out of it. So it's really, this is just it's an asset play here. You do not want to get to the postseason and have Durant hurt or banged up by any means.
No.
You want to be kind of cautious as you move into how you approach this.
And it's not like he's playing 40 minutes a night. He's playing 35.8 minutes per night. So that's a little bit high, maybe a little bit higher than we thought. We thought the Nets would have a lot of blowout wins where they could just kind of rest their stars in the fourth quarter. They haven't had that opportunity yet. So it's not like he's playing an unreasonable amount of minutes. And then the other piece to this that's not really mentioned is James Harden might be 12th on the list, but he's 35.5. You're talking about 0.3 minutes less. Like, it's not like Durant is playing all these minutes and James Harden is kicking back, relaxing, playing 20 minutes a night. Now, they're both logging a lot of minutes right now. Is that ideal? Maybe not. But, some players, they'll say, hey, we'd rather be on the floor and in rhythm and all of that rather than off the floor.
Yeah, and it's so funny to just think about it. And everybody who knows me, I know you know this. I am not well, back in the day, guys were tougher. And
right.
That's all stupidity.
Walked uphill both ways to school through snow.
Exactly. Yep. Now, I will say I did get an email today that said, now that you're getting into the latter years of your career, here's how you can fight ageism in the workplace before you retire. So that was that was pleasant to receive. Yeah, that was I'm not quite there.
Did you have the urge to go yell at clouds or something like that? Tell somebody to get off your lawn?
I've been doing that since I turned 20. But anyway, it's 35 minutes is not, guys used to regularly average well over 40 minutes per game.
Yep.
I remember Allen Iverson, it was like, 40, up in the high 40s for him for several years running. And this was a guy who was, 6 feet tall, 150 pounds and get drilled into the ground every time he drove to the basket. So I worry a little bit about, where we're at with getting too worked up on minutes played at times. I think Kevin Durant's going to be fine.
Speaking of minutes played and injuries and all that sort of stuff, oh boy, we got walloped by some injuries yesterday. And let's start with Bam Adebayo. Oh,
yeah,
come
huge.
on. Thumb injury. This is a brutal blow for the Miami Heat. He's going to be out for quite a while here. And that's, like, the Miami Heat have been tremendous, but he's really critical to a lot of what they do. There's no real replacing him. They're just going to have to try to, Eric Spoelstra's going to have to try to adjust his scheme a bit and make things work as much as he can. But reality is Miami takes a step back here without Bam.
Yeah, Miami's also Jimmy Butler's banged up.
Yes.
Playing without him. Duncan Robinson apparently lost his talent to the Monstars and can't shoot anymore. He last night 0 for 7 from 3. A lot of games like that in his ledger this year where he just has not shot it well. Dwayne Dedman stepped in, started, played 30 minutes per game. The backup minutes largely went to PJ Tucker. Behind him, or some extreme small ball lineups for Miami as well with KZ Okpala logging a few minutes at the 5 here and there. But it's tough. This was one of my worries about the Heat this year for the regular season is their depth good enough to sustain all the way through? Because I think playoff-wise, they're, let's call it 7-8 guys. You're fine. You're good. You were going to be good. My concern now is guys are out. Other guys are banged up. they're going to have to push because you don't want to slip too far because you don't want to be in the Lakers position of last year where then you got to go through the play-in and then your
Right.
playoff path is very hard and all that stuff. And that they're let's see, they are currently fifth in the East, but they're only a couple games clear of Philadelphia, who's in 11th.
But they started the
Um,
season looking like the best team in the
mhm.
East. They
Yeah,
started they
yeah, they did.
started well,
Yep.
pun intended. They started very hot, right? And
Yeah.
now they've kind of come back to earth, and part of that is the injuries are starting to take its toll. Like you said before the season started, this could be a depth issue for them.
Yep. Yeah. So I'm just worried how hard can you push without Bam? Because PJ Tucker, we know PJ Tucker can play the five, and that's a really good thing to
Sure.
be able to go to. You just don't want to be going to it in December,
Yeah.
for not, and especially not for 30 plus minutes a game or anything like that. So let's see where they go from here. They're another team, as we've talked about, just roster construction wise. It's a little hard to find their way out of this if they wanted to make a trade because they were top heavy in salaries. They don't have a lot of those mid range salaries that they would probably trade
Mhm.
here. But yeah, and then they just got to figure out what's going on with Duncan Robinson and find a way to get him going because this is not this all of a sudden turns into a really rough looking
Contract.
stretch for them if they don't have him doing what he can. Yeah, and the
And
contract looks pretty brutal as well. My guess is he'll find it. He'll figure it
yeah.
out. The track record is there, but yeah, this is not going to be an easy stretch for Miami by any means.
Well, this guy was an absolute sniper, and through 22 games of the season, last year he shot 41% from three, and a lot of these are high difficulty threes on the move,
Yep.
where he really uses his height at 6'7" to kind of shoot over guys.
And his
So he
insanely quick release.
Yes, so he was absolutely fantastic. But this season, 32% from three, and I'm rounding up there to get him to 32%, 35% from the field. And he's a guy
And
where players like him have so much of their value tied to their shooting percentage,
yes.
right? There's some guys where if they're shooting 32% from three, it's not like if Giannis is shooting 32% from three, would you like him shooting better? Yes. Do you care? Not that much because he's going to do so
Yep.
many other things out there. And look, at 6'7", he's got some size, some switchability and things like that in terms of Duncan Robinson. But if he's only shooting 32% from three, you're taking away his main source of value as a basketball player and you're turning it into a
I would
negative.
argue his only.
Yeah.
I mean, what else does he do? He's not a good defender.
He's not
He's
good, but he's got
not
the size to switch at least.
Yeah, but I mean, it's I go back to you watching the playoffs. Teams go at him.
Sure.
He's the guy
Yes.
you're trying to go at. Now, some of that's because the rest of the Heat's guys are usually really good defenders in the opening group, so you want to attack where you can. But yeah, if he's not knocking down shots, it starts to become, well, what do we have you out there for? Now, it'd be next year at some point before teams would stop guarding him
Yeah.
like he's Duncan Robinson, right? Those reputations last forever. I always think about it as like home run hitters in baseball.
hmm
Even after the power is gone, they still get pitched to because people remember like, yeah, this guy's still he hit 40 home runs a year ago. So that's just something to keep an eye on. But yeah, it's going to be rough for Miami here over the next little bit.
Absolutely. Another injury to discuss here, Damian Lillard. A more minor injury. Sounds like he's going to be out, about 10 days or so.
Yeah.
And it was an abdominal strain. And so with him dealing with that, I mean, Portland, like they also lost Nasir Little. We could be looking at getting closer to a decision point here. Like Portland's got to decide what they're going to do here at some point because it doesn't feel like they've had the start that they really needed to this season in order to kind of settle everybody down in terms of do they need to blow this whole thing up? And then, of course, we know the issues that they've got in the front office right now as well.
Yeah, I mean they're 11-11 on the year. Puts them right with the Clippers, the Nuggets, the Lakers, the Grizzlies, the Mavericks, the surprising Timberwolves. It's that the good news is if you're going to be missing guys, or you're missing them when who's coming up to catch you from behind?
Mm-hmm.
Probably not anybody from that group behind. If Dame's out, we've seen what CJ McCollum can do. He it tends to play pretty well when they put the ball in his hands. They have now the most extreme home road splits in the NBA.
I was just looking at that.
10-1 at home, 1-10 on the road. That is really kind of insane
Unreal.
when you look at that. But yeah, it is that they would have to really fall apart over the next week and a half without Dame to even be in danger of teams catching them from behind. But yeah, it's I'm with you more on the bigger picture is, or where are we going with this?
Yeah,
But that's what year 5 of having that conversation
true.
with the Trailblazers. Like I don't know, where we're gonna go.
And then the last injury to get to, Michael Porter Jr. for the Denver Nuggets does have surgery. Nuggets currently sitting in 10th, so just barely in the play-in if it were to start today. Now the West, like you mentioned, is pretty compact there in the middle though. So,
Yeah.
a couple of, they are one game out of being in 5th place as well in the Western
Yeah.
Conference. So it's not like they
Game
are
and a half
complete
from home court advantage. I mean,
right.
that's also it's the beginning of December.
Yes.
That's yeah.
Right. So it's not like they're completely out of things here, but Michael Porter Jr. does have surgery. Probably it sounds like he's done for the season. Injuries are not fun. Injuries are not fun, and they have decimated this Denver team, and we'll see what happens from here. Nikola Jokic is absolutely tremendous, but I know this isn't Michael Porter Jr. here, but does Jokic get back-to-back MVP consideration if the Nuggets are sitting in 9th or 10th place at the end of the season?
Probably not. I think enough people will hold that against
Yeah.
him to say, like, hey, you needed to lift your team a little bit higher out. But if they get up, let's say they can play themselves up around home court advantage, then I think it'll be right there again. Last night's game, they played here in Orlando, so I watched a good chunk of that game. It was a pretty good example of where things can go wrong for this team. They built a 16-point lead. They were basically Jokic was just finding cutters left and right, and they were slicing the Magic up. And then once the Magic kind of said, "Are we going to Magic have a hand?" Perimeter. And once they did that, it really kind of locked down. It turned into a lot of Will Barton, Monte Morris, Aaron Gordon trying to create for themselves. And that's how the Magic came back. And then the Magic really, kind of pushed. In Orlando's depth, oddly enough, kind of helped them swing that game a little bit because they had a lot more guys off the bench that they felt comfortable going to than the Nuggets did, which is, that's a sentence I never thought I would say at the beginning of the season, that the Magic's depth was a big reason why they beat Denver in a game.
Yeah, and welcome back, Cole Anthony, 24, 8, and 7.
Yes.
On my bench on my fantasy roster. But yes,
brutal.
had a tremendous return. So the Magic pick up the win. I mean, that's losing to Orlando is not going to be making Denver feel any better about where they're at currently. We'll see where things go from here. Again, I think they're going to be a team to watch in the next few weeks to see what happens, because that could influence some decision making as we get closer and closer to the deadline.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. Yep.
All right. Well, I think that's about it for today. We got some interesting Kyrie Irving news, talked a little bit about Kevin Durant, James Harden minutes, their contractual situations, and then unfortunately more injuries that we got to dive into. Turn off injuries, please, NBA. Tired of this. Every day it feels like there's more and more good players getting hurt. So hopefully we can have a injury-free next week or so. That would be wonderful.
Yeah, wouldn't that be nice? It's that would be really, really good.
All right, everybody, make sure you do subscribe right here to the NBA Front Office show. Make sure you turn on those notifications as well. And if you're listening to the podcast version of this, follow us over on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever it is that you listen to podcasts. Till next time, everybody, see ya and stay safe.